Nowadays, we have a myriad of 3D softwares that architects could use to produce perspectives of different views. One example is SketchUp, which is what you are looking at right now. But have you ever thought, what did the architects used to do to plot accurate perspectives during those times when these programs were not yet available? Please stay with me and I will demonstrate step by step how to plot accurate two-point perspectives using the direct projection method. First, I would like to share you a diagram from my university days, back when I was in architecture school. You may pause this and read the illustration of the basic idea about the direct projection method. The three most important horizontal lines are the picture plane, horizon line and the ground line, while the 3 points you need to keep in mind are the station point and the two vanishing points at both left and right. The picture plane is an imaginary vertical plane, like a window pane between the subject and the viewer. If you are looking out through the glass window with a grid pattern framing, that window pane is the picture plane, and the subject image that you are looking at on the glass pane can be transferred onto your paper using the grid method. With that in mind, imagine that you are looking at a house, and in between is a glass pane. That glass pane represents the picture plane. Keep in mind that the station point is the location of the viewer, while the vanishing points are the meeting points where parallel lines converge on the horizon line with respect to the viewer. With that out of the way, let's begin with the tutorial. For this demonstration, I found a simple one-story house that we could use as our subject. We need a floor plan and a facade elevation which are both on the same scale. This is important to make the perspective projection as accurate as possible. Since I am working at home with no large format drawing instruments, I will simulate this hand drawing exercise with the use of Photoshop. Yes, even though I will use a computer program, the principles of direct projection method can easily be demonstrated by 2D drawing using Photoshop software. Now, let's put the floor plan at the top center and the elevation at the lower left corner. The ground line is where the elevation stands on at ground floor level, while the horizon line is more or less at 1.75 meters above the ground line. We are going to plot a normal view perspective, so the height of the horizon is generally at the eye level of a person. Actually, we can locate the horizon line higher above the ground line if we want to plot an aerial perspective, but maybe that is an item for the future video. Lastly, the picture plane will sit right below the floor plan. We are rotating the plan 30 degrees up at the right side, so the left side will be about 60 degrees from the picture plane. It is important to let the bottom corner of the plan touch the picture plane, as this point will be our measuring line. Since this corner touched the picture plane, we can measure the projection of its height as the same scale of the floor plan and the elevation. After labeling the horizontal lines, we will identify the location of the viewer, or what we now call the station point. Normally, the peripheral conal vision of the person is about 60 degrees. Our station point could move anywhere we desired, as long as the floor plan is within the peripheral vision of the viewer. Let's begin by making line projections from the station point to each of the important corners of the plan, including the window openings. Take note of the intersections made by these rays with the picture plane. Then, from these intersections, draw vertical lines downward to the ground line. These vertical lines will become the edges of the building perspective. It's important to do this now to judge if we are satisfied with the view. We could move the station point and do the initial projections again until we are happy with the view. After that, we can determine the location of the vanishing points by drawing a line from the station point parallel to both left and right sides of the floor plan as I do here. Take note of the intersections made by these two lines with the picture plane. Draw vertical lines from each of these intersections downward down to the horizon line, which will be our vanishing points. Draw horizontal lines from the key levels of the elevation until they touch the measuring line, which is the vertical projection from the picture plane touched by the floor plan corner. After that, start projecting line rays from the vanishing points to the measuring line intersected by the horizontal projections from the elevation. Continue the projections from the vanishing points to the measuring line until we get the general shape of our house. Take note that you can measure the vertical levels of the measuring line, which is the same scale as the elevation at the left. Now, let's start doing the projections of the roof line from the station point. As we continue, let's extend the outer wall lines until they touch the edge of the roof. These intersections will be our guidelines to make an accurate projection of the roof overhung. Similar to what we did before, let's make vertical projections from the picture plane intersected by these rays from the roof edge. I colored the lines black to make it easier to see which lines I am working on and proceed to construct a roof ridge. Remember that the more complicated the plan is, the more projection lines you will need. It's good that for this demonstration, I selected a shed-type structure as an easy subject. Now, we continue to form the roof basing on the vertical projections from the picture plane and the aid of the vanishing points. Continue projecting the vertical guidelines from the picture plane and find the corresponding guidelines from the elevation to intersect with the measuring line to aid you on finding the right slope of the roof. Be conscious of the green rays we projected earlier from the station point because those are the accurate points wherein we can determine the location of the roof overhang on the perspective. With the aid of the vertical lines from its intersection with the picture plane, we can now proceed to shape the slope of the roof. After the overall layout of the structure is completed, we then proceed to finalize the outlines of our subject by tracing over it. If we are drawing this manually by hand on a drawing board, this is the time to put a tracing paper over and start tracing the final edges of our perspective and proceed by adding more details on the subject. After we are done tracing the overall layout of the perspective, we may now think over the detail elements of the house, like for example, the windows, its framing, and the detailing of the roofing shingles. Let's start by doing vertical projections from the picture plane to guide us on the location of the windows. Using the elevation on the left, we can draw horizontal lines from the general height of the windows to intersect the measuring line. I use blue vertical lines and yellow-green lines for the construction lines coming from the vanishing points in order to distinguish it easily. We then proceed on drawing the general shape of the windows basing on the left and right vanishing points. Since we are working on Adobe Photoshop, we can turn off and turn on some layers. Just like putting on layers of tracing papers, we can easily take out some unwanted layers. And looking at our elevation at the left, we can copy the detailed design of the windows and paste it over our perspective in order to save time, so that we do not need to draw each windows individually. Using the power of Photoshop, we can then proceed on distorting and fitting in the windows perfectly over the final perspective. After that, we could just trace over the window frame over the distorted image one by one, so at least we do not need to do more projections from the picture plane and the vanishing points. And for the roofing shingle details, we are going to use the same technique we did on the windows. We will lasso in and copy the roofing textures of the elevation and paste it over our perspective. We will then distort the pasted image to fit it in with our perspective. We are going to do the same thing with a larger roof, copying, pasting, and then fitting the textures in to create a convincing perspective drawing. Next, we will apply colors to the walls, overhang ceiling and fascia boards. These colors will be copied from the elevation at the right side, and it's a good thing that we started with a detailed building elevation, because we were able to progress really quickly with just copying and pasting. To enhance the 3D quality of our perspective, we will now proceed to create contrasts on the opposite sides of the surfaces to create a much more solid look for the house. After we are happy with the contrast, let's cast some shadows coming from the roof overhang. By using the polygon lasso, let's map up the shadow shapes and proceed to fill it up with a darker color. Make sure we are on a separate layer so we could manipulate the transparency of the shadow to create a more convincing effect. Now, let's step back and look at our progress so far. I would suggest to add some entourage elements like trees and people to enliven the perspective. For our entourage, we will just choose people and tree graphics from my image library. It's always good to have these things ready at any moment so that we will not need to draw people and trees every time we need them on a perspective. It's always very convenient to just copy and paste, that is what I call working smart. I also have a library for cars, but I would like to make this perspective as simple as possible. I chose this group of people for our perspective to liven up the scene. In laying out persons on a normal view 2-point perspective, make sure that their head is more or less on the horizon line level. This is because the horizon line is always at the eye level of the viewer, and it's always safe to assume that these people we are using at the perspective are more or less the same height of our viewer. Lastly, we quickly lay out some grass color to represent the ground area. There you have it, my friends. I hope you like this tutorial, and let's see each other again soon. Thank you very much for watching. Before you leave, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share my channel. You may click the notification bell icon so you won't miss out on my latest uploads. Goodbye for now, and I would like to see you again on my upcoming videos. Again, bye.